Go ahead.
All right. My name's Kirk, and I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for inviting me tonight. I usually ask the people that I'm going to speak to bring a pillow because I don't have a real heart-throbbing story. I didn't drive off any cliffs. I didn't hurt anybody other than everybody I knew. Um, I'll give you some particulars first. I was born in a little town next to Will Run Airport in Michigan called Ypsilanti. It's about 10 miles from where I live now. It's where the Willow Run bomber plant, Henry Ford built the Willow Run bomber plant there. And that's where my dad worked during World War II. I was born in 1943. Um, I was raised in Ypsilanti, and as far as, well, let me give you some more particulars. I'm in Saline now, Saline, Michigan, and you're welcome to come to my home group. It's Last Chance in Saline at 322 West Michigan Avenue. We meet at 7:30 on Thursdays, and it's a big book study. And we've been doing that. And I think the group started in 1977, I believe. Uh, I have a sponsor. My sponsor has a sponsor, and his sponsor has a sponsor. Very dedicated to the big book, and I'm one of those you may have heard of. I don't think there's a lot of us, but I'm not a big fan of rewriting the big book. Um, I like it just the way it is. I got sober with the big book. It is my Bible, in addition to the Christian Bible, and I read both paragraphs or sentences or pages or whatever every day, and I'm staying sober. My sobriety date isn't all that long ago. It's February 16th, 2003. I was 78 days away from my 60th birthday when I sobered up. I didn't want to get sober, but I'm married to a wonderful gal for almost 59 years now. And she was the one that gave me the nudge. When I was growing up, it was looking back, and I'm sure I add to it, but it was a rather idyllic family situation. I have a sister 4 years older. I had a mother and father that were married their entire lives to each other. Um, my dad was a good provider. We went to church every Sunday and ate all our meals together, breakfast, well, not lunch because I was in school, but we ate breakfast and dinner together. A very caring mother, a very caring father, a lot of discipline in the house. There was no good reason why I should have drank other than I'm an alcoholic. Um, when I was in high school, I was a pretty good student, mostly A's, a few B's scattered around, right up until I got my driver's license when I was 16, and then it went to all B's. I started drinking, I believe, when I was about 15. That's my memory, 15 years old. And I think I got drunk probably once at least when I was 15. And drinking thereafter was rather sporadic. When I turned 18, I went off to Michigan State University, which is a wonderful school. But I spent most of my college career out at Lake Lansing, drinking and talking to the cattle out there. My roommate and I would have a few drinks and go lean over the fence. The cows would come up and we'd talk to them. And that was, I feel very bad about that because my dad was not a man of means. And he really busted his hind end to pay the bills that I handed him. And I'm very, very ashamed of that. But in any event, I started, this is part of my story, and I hope it doesn't bother anybody. I started flying airplanes when I was 14. I started working out at Ann Arbor Airport, washing airplanes and helping a mechanic and working the counter, pumping gas and doing whatever. And I had my private pilot's license. You could do it back then when I was, I believe I was 16. when I got my private pilot's license. And I just matriculated through the rest of the licenses. So I got a commercial rating after I had 200 hours. I got an instrument rating, got a multi-engine rating, and so on and so on. I really wanted to fly for the airlines. And I dropped out of Michigan State University in my junior year. I won't go into that, but I dropped out because the airlines at the time were only requiring a 2-year associate degree. And I came home and I was working. My dad got me a job at Ford Motor Company assembly plant. And I worked there for a couple of years, and I was building time at the airport. Time is everything to a pilot, hours in the air. And I met a good man there who was 12 years older than I was, and we went out one night, and I liked to fast dance back in the 60s, and we were in a bar. And I don't think I was necessarily drinking that. And I have no recollection of it, but I don't think I was drinking. But I met this older lady who was sitting opposite my friend. And as I would turn around and listen to the music, she would twist her ankles in my stool. So I asked her, I said, would you like to dance? And she said, love to. So we went out and we danced a few dances, came back, sat down, and I said, I'm not trying to offend you, but I said, I think my friend here and you are probably of the same age group. And she said, probably. And I said, would you like me to introduce you? So she did. Long story being, she called me back about 3 weeks later. It was love at first sight. She and my friend eventually got married. And as far as I know, they're still married. And she called me and introduced me to my now wife. And Marion and I met on a first date. And again, the drinking wasn't a problem that I recall. And after, I believe it was 4 months, we got married. And there was a lot of people talking about that. They thought for sure she was pregnant. And we didn't have a child for another 5 years. Got a job in the airlines when I was 23 years old. And again, drinking wasn't a problem that I recall. I was inducted into the Army. I got a letter from Lyndon Baines Johnson welcoming me into the United States Army. And I served my time at Fort Knox, New Jersey, and Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and Fort Knox, Kentucky. And after I got out, I came back and continued flying. And my wife is a super intelligent girl. And she had been teaching by that time for about 5 years. She taught Latin and English. And we came back here, and drinking just wasn't a big problem. I can recall with some clarity opening the liquor cupboard for people that would come over, and I had dust on the bottles. We had a lot of hard liquor, and there was dust on the bottles. We had a son who is now 54 years old, and life was good. As I got involved in local politics and was on city council for a number of years in my little burg. And then I dropped out of that and started working for the Airline Pilots Association in a political fashion. And when I got done with that, still flying, my father, at my age of 32, my father developed brain cancer and was dead within 6 months. And as best as I can relate, that's when the drinking started to be rather harmful. I continued to do politics and work, at the airline for probably another 6 or 7 years, and it got to the point, folks, where, and I'm sure some of you can relate. I was starting to plan my day around my drinking. And I don't know when that occurred, but I started to plan my day around my drinking. I can remember with some clarity. I used to hold the bottle up to the glass with the ice and the soda in it. I was a Scotch drinker, and I would count and I would pour. At the end of my drinking career, the ice was either in the glass or who cares, and I filled the glass with Scotch. My disease, our disease, is progressive, and I'm living testimony as to how bad it can get. I can recall I set the bed on fire one night. I used to be a smoker 30 years ago. I smoked, and I fell asleep on the bed with a lit cigarette and lit a bed on fire. My wife was not a smoker. She wasn't much of a drinker ever. She's only 5'2", so you get 2 drinks down her, and she's pretty much done for the day. I started hanging around with people that drank like I did, and it was a very debilitating disease. But contrary to every open talk I've heard to date, I didn't want to quit. I never had the urge to quit. I never tried quitting. I never failed at quitting. I just didn't want to quit. This was my answer to life. This is how I got through the day. And if you ask me why I drank, what was so tough about my day, I don't have a good answer. It was just, I was an alcoholic, and I drank every day, and I drank all day on days off. I was fairly senior at the airline, and I could pick my trips and my flying patterns. And I would pick trips where I could get all the flying out of the way within maybe 12 days a month. And the rest of the time I had off. And besides doing yard work and taking care of the honeydew projects around the house, I drank. That's what I did. My wife decided when she was, I think she was 39 years old, and we had been married since we were both 21. She decided that she wanted to work again. Our son was 10. And she said, I want to go back to work. And I said, well, what do you want to do? She said, I think I want to teach. So I said, well, find out what they're paying and let me know. So she came back, and I don't know what the number was, but it wasn't substantial. And I said, you probably ought to be at home for that kind of money, because it's going to cost us that much money just to take care of the house. And our son was 10, so somebody had to be home. She said, well, I want to work. And I said, well, be a lawyer. And she said, no, I couldn't be a lawyer. And I said, sure you can. I said, you're smart as hell and you love to argue. I said, you'd be a good lawyer. So she took the LSAT at University of Michigan, and she was admitted to their law school at Wayne State University, which is in downtown Detroit. And that girl for 3 years drove every school day from Saline into Wayne State University and went to law school. She was a straight A student. She was editor of the Law Review, and she's a very smart gal. I'm very fortunate to have met her. So anyway, as we're getting older and my drinking's getting more serious, I can recall with some clarity, I wasn't ever going to drink before noon. That was my cutoff. And then I started convincing myself, well, it's noon somewhere. I'd have a drink. And I can remember watching her drive down the driveway going to work in the morning, and I had a scotch in my hand at 7:30 in the morning. Life just stopped having a lot of good meaning. My son was out of the house. He's a graduate of Eastern Michigan University, and he was off doing his thing. So I was alone in the house with a golden retriever and a cat every day, and I drank and I drank and I drank. So after so many years of that, I don't think I'm forgetting anything, but after so many years of that, Marion and I had some conversations. And about a year before I stopped drinking for good, she said, I think you need AA. I'd never heard of you folks. I didn't know what AA was. And I said, what is that? She said, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, I'll ask you again, what is that? And she said, well, it's folks, I think they get together and they help each other stop drinking. I said, well, all right. So my first meeting, I went to a church here in town, a Presbyterian church, and on Wednesday nights at 7:00, they had a meeting. And I went down there for the first time. And as you well know, maybe you know, I think the hardest doors to get through in my lifetime were the doors of AA, because it was an admission I had a problem. And I thought I had it well under control. I walked into that church, went down to the basement, and the meeting leader patted a chair right next to him, and he was sitting up in front of maybe 15 people, 20 people. And he said, have a seat. He said, I haven't seen you before. Are you new? And I said, well, this is first time here. He said, well, welcome. And somebody asked me if I'd had a drink in the last 24 hours. And of course I lied and I said no. And they gave me a little silver 24-hour chip. Then the opening readings were over with. I thought I was in a cult. I really did, because these readings just didn't ring my bell. And I was sitting there wondering, what in the hell am I doing here? The leader said, now, he said, we take a 5-minute break. If you've got to do anything, to have a cigarette or whatever, he said, go outside. And then we're going to have table meetings. And I said, well, I would like to go out and check on my dog. So I went out and I got the parking lot. And I got my truck. And I drove around for another 45 minutes. And I went home. I did not go back to that meeting. And I got home. My wife was up. She was in bed, but she was up. And she said, how was the meeting? And I said, it was okay. And folks, I did that for another 9 months. Every Wednesday night, I got in my truck with my dog and I drove to this meeting, or not to the meeting, but I drove around for an hour and 10 minutes and came home. And she would ask me most nights, how was the meeting? Well, who was there? I said, no. I said, I don't know names. I said, it's an anonymous organization. I said, I don't know names. I lied through my teeth. Well, Christmas of 2002, my drinking was I had my foot on the gas pedal. It was bad. And I was getting drunk every day. I was retired. By the way, I retired early. And so I had retired in 1998 at the age of 55. And there was a lot of recriminations I had about retiring early. I was kicking myself in the tail feathers for doing it because I loved aviation. But anyway, I don't have a good excuse for drinking other than I was an alcoholic. So I started drinking really bad at Christmas time, 2002. And in January 2003, on the 24th of January, I had we were doing some remodeling in our house. And there were workers in the house, and I ordered one of these huge mega pizzas. I don't even know what you call them, but they're big. And some friends stopped over. We had a card table set up, what used to be the dining room. All the furniture was moved into storage. And we're sitting there, drinking not alcohol, but soda pop, and eating pizza. And there had been a vacuum cleaner delivered to our house, I think at least 10 days before, that was still in the box sitting there. And the house was a mess because the workers were in every room doing whatever. And my wife came home from work, and here's my friend sitting there at a card table, and I'm having a drink of soda pop. And the vacuum cleaner, which might take 5 minutes to put together, still hadn't been put together, and I was drunk. And I wasn't, my liquor, I don't think I ever was a stumbling drunk. I think I managed to walk upright. But she came in and she could see by my eyes and my mannerisms that I'd been drinking. And she asked the folks that were there that I was sitting with to leave. And she started crying and she walked into our bedroom and packed a bag. I didn't say a word because she is a litigator. She likes to call herself a real attorney. She's in court almost every day. And you don't win arguments with this woman. She's a fantastic litigator. She's fun to watch. So anyway, she said, Kirk, she said, I'm not going to watch you die. She said, you've been making your choices. I'm going to make a choice. She said, I can't live like this. And she grabbed a cat under one arm and a bird cage under the other arm and dragged her suitcase out to her car and off she went. So I was there in the house alone, drunk. In the morning, I got up and I needed to drink. And I was a cheap Scotch drinker. I drank out of plastic half gallons. And I searched around the house because I had at least two of them in the house at all times. And I found one that I poured a drink, but it was empty. So I went to throw it away. And remember, it was January 24th. So it was cold here in Michigan, very cold. And my wastebasket was out in my garage. So I opened the house door to the garage and I tried to flip the empty plastic into one of the big 50-gallon barrels, plastic tubs, and it bounced out. And I thought, damn, I'm in house slippers. So I walk out there and I pick the bottle up and I go to put it in the 50-gallon barrel. Both 50-gallon barrels were full of empty half-gallon Scotch bottles. That's why it bounced out. So I thought to myself, that girl might have a point. I may have an issue with alcohol. So it took another 14 days for me to decide that I got to do something. It was a toss-up. Alcohol, I found, is a very, very powerful addiction. I dearly love my wife, but it was a toss-up. For 14 days, I tossed a coin as to whether I wanted my booze or my marriage. And I was 38 years married at the time, and the marriage went out. So I called a place about 30 miles away, I guess, treatment center, made an appointment, got up there and started I believe it was 16 days. I had to get it cleared with insurance and what have you. And I went up there for 16 days. And I got a really good education on my disease and what I might want to try to get over my disease. On the 16th day, I was packing. All the rest of my inmate or intake class was packing, and we were all going to go home. And Marion drove up, and she was talking with my counselor, and I got a page over the speakers that I should come down and see the counselor. So I walked in, and I was really planning on going home. Been up there for 16 days. And the two of them are sitting there, and the gist of the conversation was, we think you need some more time here. I was so upset, angry. Just right to the sole of my shoes. I was angry, and I guess I had that body posture like this. I was all folded up, and I didn't say a word, and I just left. And I didn't say goodbye to my wife, didn't kiss her goodbye, nothing. I went back to my room, and I was upset. Well, the folks at this treatment facility had taught me to get on my knees and pray to the God of my understanding. So I thought, I'll try that. I used to, when I gave open talks, tear up at this point because it was the most moving moment that I can recall in my life. I got on my knees, don't know what I said, but I prayed to the God of my understanding for help. And there was, it was, I don't know if it was a Bill Wilson white light, but it was a white light in the room. All of a sudden, a wash went over me. I stood up and I didn't care if I stayed there for the rest of my days. If it was going to help me, that's fine. And so I've been a pretty serious believer ever since that day, because it really knocked my socks off. It was magnificent. So they said, go to a meeting on your first day. So I stopped at a meeting in this town where I went to the treatment center. It was right next to a bar, and it was a big book meeting. And I went in and participated. And then I drove home, or my wife drove home. I looked around for a group, and I couldn't find a group. Ann Arbor is, I don't want to offend any sensitivities. Ann Arbor is a town that is anything but conservative. And the meetings there, they talked about walking their dog. They talked about divorces. They talked about money problems. They talked about everything but the big book. Talked about everything but the steps, anything but the traditions, nothing about the concepts. So I was still searching around, and I found this meeting in my town that I'm living in. So I wandered in there, and God bless them, my home group, Last Chance, assigns sponsors. You don't get out of there without a sponsor. And so as the meeting was ending, I I was getting up and I putting a coat on. It's wintertime. Putting a coat on, leaving, and this young man walks up to me, and he shook my hand, stuck his hand up, shook my hand, and he said, "Well, he said, you're new here, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "How much sobriety you got?" And I forgot what I told him, 30 days, 20, whatever it was. He said, "Do you have a sponsor?" And I said, "No, I'll find one myself." He said, "Well, let me introduce you to your temporary sponsor." So he walked me over to another young man. John, my first sponsor, was, I believe at the time, 40 years old. No, 30. He'd be 30 or 32 years old. My son at the time was 32 years old. Now, I don't take a whole lot of guidance from my son, a little bit, but not a lot. So John introduced himself. We sat down and we exchanged information. And he said, "I want you to call me every day." And he said, "Without fail." He said, "No excuses." And I thought, well, we'll see how this works out. So I started calling him, and we started meeting, and we went through from the flyleaf of the fourth edition of the Big Book all the way through Dr. Bob's story in a period of about probably, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months maybe. And my life changed. It totally changed. And John told me at the beginning, he had a lot of things he told me that I thought, yeah, right. That have turned out to manifest themselves. He said, he said, "You're going to change." He said, "You've been a taker all your life." He says, "You're going to learn to be a giver, and you're going to think about giving. You're going to think about sharing. You're going to think about other people other than yourself." And that was a new concept for me. So I got involved in AA from the standpoint, they made me, I think they made me a chairman of the group with about 7 months sobriety. And a funny story, at least I think it's humorous. We were meeting at a UAW hall, and we were getting our chairs out of another building outside. We had to carry them into this big room and set them up with tables. And I said, well, as chair, I said, "I think Last Chance ought to paint that building. I think we ought to get a work party going and paint that building." And nobody replied. They just all sat there and looked at me. I'm the new guy. So after the meeting, John says, "Let me know how that works out for you." Well, to make a long story short, it never got painted. The building didn't. And I was a work in progress. But our GSR, I didn't know what GSR stood for. And he was reporting back to the group. He said, "No, I didn't go to the district meeting. I had blah, blah to do that night. Or I didn't go to the area assembly. It was too far away. It was 30 miles away or something." So I was the alternate GSR. And I went to a meeting here in Saline. That was my first area assembly, and I might have missed maybe 5 or 6 meetings in 20 years. of area assemblies. I got very involved in it. It is key to my sobriety, as far as I'm concerned. It is a fantastic way for this alcoholic to hear people, to hear what's on their mind, to hear what's going on in the fellowship. And I've always been curious, and I was wondering where the books come from. Where do the pamphlets come from? Last Chance has an extensive library they put out at every meeting, and I was just curious when I bought a lot of the books and I read a lot of the books. And I read both conference approved and non-conference approved. But I was curious about, how does this stuff come to be? Well, if you get involved in general service, you find out in fairly short order how that all comes to pass. I was there, and after probably, I'll say 3 years, maybe of attending area assemblies. We used to meet every month. Now we meet every other month. District meets every month. But attending area assemblies, it was a period of time where somebody nominated me, and I think it was CPC chair or something. And so I became a committee chair, did that for a year. And then somebody nominated me for treasurer of the assembly. And so I became a treasurer. And then I became, I think, an alternate chairman, and then a chairman of the assembly. And that, as far as I'm concerned, that's the best job in the AA, is chairman of an area assembly. I had a ball. It was fun. And then somebody, one of the past delegates, nominated me for alternate delegate. And I kind of was in a quandary about whether I really wanted to do that. I'm retired at the time. I was 71 years old, something like that. And I thought, well, maybe this is for a younger guy. But I got nominated and I got elected. And 2 years later, I was a delegate, and I went to the conference 2 years in a row. And I go now to the East Central Regional Conferences and all their doings. And what it does, folks, when I was about 7 years sober, heavily involved in area service work, I was driving with my wife into Detroit, and I said, I'm kind of chasing my tail. I sponsor a lot of guys. I said, I'm doing all this area assembly stuff, and I'm doing the district. I said, I think I'm just going to back away from all this volunteer stuff, and just help my home group. And Marion sat there, and again, she's a very intelligent lady, and she didn't say anything, didn't argue with me. And she said, so you're going to quit? And I said, well, I wouldn't put it like that. She said, well, how would you put it? And I said, well, I'm going to stop doing it. She said, it's just words. She said, let me get it right. She says, you've been sober for 7 years and heavily involved in AA, and now you're going to quit? She says, that sounds like good alcoholic thinking to me. And of course, I didn't quit. I continued to do area service. But this story doesn't really have an ending. We have an area assembly coming up right away. And the fellow that I'm replacing tonight, sitting in for, Ted Straubel, he was my alternate delegate. And so Ted and I had a lot in common. He's got, I don't know, maybe, Stephen, maybe you know how many years Ted has. He's 40-something, 41 years, something like that. And I only have 20. So I've learned a lot from that man. And that's what I love about general service, is I get to meet people that are really committed to AA. And I also have come to appreciate the people that are really committed to their home groups, that are doing service in their home group. They're constant. My sponsor told me, he said, you never go a month without being of service in some capacity. He said, I want you to volunteer for whatever it is. I came in, folks, after ashtrays. Ashtrays ended, I think, in Michigan probably in the late 90s. So I never had ashtray duty. but man, have I made coffee. There's a group I go to that has about 150 people come on Wednesday nights, and you got to get there about 2 hours early to get the big coffee pots going. And I just love people. It's been so good to me. My life has changed 100%. John told me, my first sponsor, that it was going to change if I did a few simple things, and I do those simple things. My day is pretty routine now. I'm retired. I get up in the morning and I don't take a shower. I don't make coffee. I don't do anything. I'm on my knees. And being 80 years old, getting on my knees, you don't want to watch when I get up because it takes about 10 minutes. I got the aches and pains, and I get up. But John told me new in sobriety, he said, there's a little switch in your kneecap. And he said, when you get on your knees and you talk to the Lord, he said, it opens his ears. So he said, I want you on your knees. I don't want you walking around saying a prayer. I want you on your knees. And I got in that habit 20 years ago, and it's one of the better habits that I have today. I don't know. There's not a whole lot talk about my disease other than it was killing me. Another thing my bride did is when I was in 1998, 5 years before I quit drinking, I had been drinking and I have a rather long driveway where I live. I take the garbage out and I put it on the tailgate of my truck and I drive at the end of the driveway and I put it out for the garbage man roadside. And I had a brand new golden retriever. She was 3 months old, and she's sitting in the passenger seat. And I get out of the truck and I leave the door open and I get out, I grab the garbage pail and I wanted to take it up to the roadside, and it was ice on the asphalt. And I went right on my tail feathers and I broke an ankle, and it was rather painful, but I was drunk. Anyway, I left the pail on the side of the driveway and I crawled back to the truck. And if any of you drive trucks, it's somewhat of an effort to get up in that high seat with a broken leg or a broken ankle. But I got up there and my dog's sitting there looking at my face, and I back up the truck and I'm in a lot of pain. And I back it into my driveway and I get near the house, and we have 3 steps up to a sidewalk and then 3 steps up to the house. Well, I think that night I had a spring jacket on, and it was about probably 20 degrees outside. I crawled up the steps and I fell asleep. And 20 degrees, it doesn't take long to turn into a popsicle. And I was laying there, and the dog started licking my face and woke me up. And I crawled another 12 feet. She licked my face and woke me up. The bottom line of this is she got me to the house and in the house, and the ambulance came, and off I go, and I got my ankle all wired up and screws and knobs and whatever. And I got home, and I was a heavy smoker, 2 packs a day. And I got to the house, and we had a worker doing some work in the house. And I said, reach in that drawer over there by the bar sink and throw me a pack of cigarettes. And he opens the drawer and he says, there's no cigarettes in here. And I always had 2 cartons of cigarettes in there. And I knew exactly what she had done. She was never a smoker. She hated smoking. And here I am all hobbled. I can't drive. I'm in a wheelchair. So I learned not to smoke. And so she made me she's also an excellent seamstress. She makes a lot of her clothes. She made a shirt for me that says, I got quit. And it's a package of cigarettes with an X over it. And so that's how I stopped smoking. And she is directly responsible for me to stop drinking. The girl saved my life at least 2 times. And I can't say enough good things about her. We're going to be married 59 years come next March. And I don't know how she's tolerated me, but I'm driving her to, she's 80 years old, and I'm driving her to a hearing tomorrow morning. She's still working like a busy bee. She's got about 10 or 12 clients. Yeah, it's just, she's got an energy that I don't know where the hell you get that kind of energy from, but she gets it. So I do what I can around the house to help her. I think I'm done. I don't think there's any more of my story. I hope I hit the high points. I see people with gray hair is what I'm looking at. So I don't know if there's any youngsters here that are struggling with whether you want sobriety or not, but give it a good try. If you haven't found sobriety yet, long-term sobriety, hang in there, stick in there, get a good sponsor. Do what they ask you to do. My sponsor said, I don't care if you like it. I don't care if you agree with it. All I care about is that you do it. And John, excellent sponsor. And I think my sobriety I owe to him. So I'm done. Thank you.